Dr. Lisa Rodriguez had been waiting for this moment her entire career. After 23 years of studying theoretical alien life, writing countless papers about what creatures from other worlds might look like, she was finally going to meet one face to face. The government facility felt cold and sterile as she walked down the long hallway. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing in the silence. 2 security guards flanked her on either side, their faces serious and professional. Lisa carried her briefcase filled with charts, diagrams, and questions she had prepared for weeks. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In her mind, she would walk into that room and immediately take control. She would be the brilliant scientist who unlocked the secrets of alien intelligence. The creature would be primitive, maybe confused, certainly in need of her expertise to help it understand the complexities of human civilization. The heavy metal door opened with a soft hiss. Lisa stepped inside, expecting to see some strange, otherworldly being cowering in the corner or perhaps staring blankly at the walls. Instead, she stopped dead in her tracks. Sitting calmly at a simple metal table was what looked almost like a human man. Almost, but not quite. His skin had a pale blue tint, like moonlight on snow. His eyes were larger than normal, a deep silver color that seemed to hold depths she couldn't measure. He was reading something, his long fingers turning pages with careful precision. Lisa blinked hard, trying to process what she was seeing. The creature was reading a physics journal. Not just any physics journal, but the latest issue of Quantum Mechanics Today, one of the most complex scientific publications in existence. "Good morning, Dr. Rodriguez," the being said without looking up from his reading. His voice was soft, almost musical, but perfectly clear English. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Lisa felt her carefully prepared introduction slip away. She had planned to start with basic concepts, maybe point to simple objects and say their names. Instead, this creature was not only speaking English, but reading advanced physics like it was a morning newspaper. "You can read," she said, immediately feeling foolish for stating something so obvious. The being looked up and smiled gently. "Yes, I can. Your language is quite beautiful, actually. Very expressive. I've been studying it for some time now." He closed the journal and placed it neatly on the table. "I am called Xander, by your pronunciation standards." Lisa set her briefcase down and pulled out a chair across from him. Her mind was racing, trying to adjust her approach. She had spent weeks preparing elementary explanations, assuming she would need to start from the very beginning. Now she felt like a teacher who had prepared for kindergarten, but walked into a graduate seminar. "Well, Xander," she said, trying to regain her composure, "I suppose we should start with some basic assessments of your cognitive abilities." Xander nodded politely. "Of course. I understand you need to establish baselines for our communication." Lisa opened her briefcase and pulled out a series of cards with simple mathematical equations. She placed the first one in front of him. "Can you solve this?" The equation was basic algebra, something a high school student might work on. Xander glanced at it for less than a second. "X equals 7, he said quietly. Lisa nodded and placed down a more complex equation. Again, Xander barely looked at it before giving the correct answer. She moved through her entire stack of mathematical problems, each one more difficult than the last. Xander answered every single one immediately, sometimes before she had finished placing the card on the table. Feeling slightly frustrated, Lisa decided to try a different approach. She pulled out a diagram of atomic structure and began explaining it in the slow, careful tone she might use with a child. "This represents the basic building blocks of matter," she said, pointing to the drawing. "The center part here is called the nucleus, and these circles around it represent electron shells where tiny particles called electrons move around the—" "Dr. Rodriguez," Xander interrupted gently, "I believe there might be a small error in your diagram." Lisa stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me?" Xander leaned forward slightly, his silver eyes focusing on the paper. The electron probability clouds you've drawn here suggest a simplified orbital model, but the actual quantum mechanical behavior would be more accurately represented with overlapping wave functions. The electrons don't actually orbit in neat circles like planets around a sun. Lisa stared at him. What he had just said was absolutely correct, and far more advanced than the basic explanation she had been giving. She felt heat creeping up her neck. "Well, yes," she said stiffly, "but I was providing a simplified version for easier understanding." "Of course," Xander said with genuine kindness in his voice. "I apologize if I overstepped. Please continue with your explanation." But Lisa couldn't continue. Her pride had been stung. Here she was, trying to teach basic science to what she had assumed was a primitive being, and instead he was correcting her diagrams with graduate-level physics knowledge. She gathered up her cards and papers, shoving them back into her briefcase, with more force than necessary. "I think that's enough for today," she said curtly. "Obviously, your species has some ability to memorize information, though I question whether you truly understand the underlying concepts." Xander said nothing, but Lisa caught what she thought might have been a flicker of disappointment in those strange silver eyes. "Tomorrow we'll move on to more complex assessments," she continued, standing up abruptly. "We'll see how well you actually comprehend what you've apparently memorized." As she walked toward the door, Lisa heard Xander's soft voice behind her. "Thank you for your time today, Dr. Rodriguez. I look forward to learning more about your perspective on these concepts." Lisa paused at the door but didn't turn around. Something in his tone made her feel uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. There had been no sarcasm, no challenge, just genuine politeness. It was almost worse than if he had argued with her. She left the room feeling unsettled and annoyed. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. She was the expert here, the one with decades of education and experience. Yet somehow, in just 30 minutes, this alien had made her feel like the student instead of the teacher. As she walked back down the long hallway, Lisa's mind was already working on tomorrow's session. She would come prepared with much more difficult questions, concepts that would surely reveal the limits of this creature's understanding. She would prove that human intelligence and education still held the advantage, no matter how many textbooks. This Xander had apparently memorized. What Lisa didn't know, couldn't know, was that in a room not far from where she had just been, Xander was speaking quietly into a small device, recording his first impressions of human behavior for his people. Back home, his report was thoughtful and measured, noting both the impressive complexity of human knowledge and the curious way that pride seemed to interfere with communication. He had come to Earth hoping to find a species ready for friendship and mutual learning. After just one meeting, he was beginning to understand that this evaluation might be more complicated than he had hoped. Lisa spent the entire night preparing for her second meeting with Xander. She pulled out her most advanced textbooks, the ones she used for graduate-level courses. If this alien wanted to play games with her intelligence, she would show him what real human knowledge looked like. She arrived at the facility early, her briefcase now packed with complex equations, advanced theoretical physics problems, and philosophical questions that had puzzled human minds for centuries. Today would be different. Today she would establish her intellectual superiority once and for all. Xander was already waiting in the same room, sitting in the exact same position as the day before. This time he was reading a book about human history. Lisa noticed it was written in what looked like ancient Greek, though she couldn't be completely sure from her angle. "Good morning, Dr. Rodriguez," Xander said, closing the book carefully and giving her that same gentle smile. "I hope you slept well." Lisa ignored the pleasantries and got straight to business. She pulled out a complex mathematical theorem and slammed it down on the table with more force than necessary. "Let's see how you handle this," she said, her voice sharp with challenge. "This is graduate-level mathematics. I doubt your species has encountered anything quite this sophisticated." Xander looked at the paper for exactly 3 seconds. "This appears to be a variation of the Riemann hypothesis," he said quietly. "The solution would involve understanding the distribution of prime numbers in relation to the complex plane. The answer is here." He pointed to a specific line in the equation. "Though I notice there's a more elegant approach if you consider the zeta function from this angle instead." He turned the paper around and, using Lisa's own pen, wrote out a solution that was not only correct but more efficient than the standard method taught in universities. Lisa felt her face growing hot. She snatched the paper back and pulled out another one, this time a physics problem about quantum entanglement that had taken her graduate students weeks to solve. "Try this one," she said, her tone becoming more aggressive. Again, Xander solved it almost instantly. Not only did he solve it, but he suggested 3 alternative approaches that would yield the same result, with fewer calculations. This pattern continued for the entire hour. Every problem Lisa presented, every complex concept she explained in condescending detail, Xander handled with quiet efficiency. Worse than that, he often improved upon her solutions or gently pointed out more effective methods. By the 3rd day, Lisa's patience was wearing thin. She had moved beyond testing his knowledge and started making pointed comments about his responses. "It's interesting how you can repeat these formulas," she said after Xander had solved another impossible equation. "I suppose your species has developed good memory techniques, even if you don't fully grasp the deeper meaning behind these concepts." Xander looked up from the paper, his silver eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "I appreciate your perspective, Dr. Rodriguez. Could you help me understand what deeper meaning I might be missing?" His question was genuine, without any trace of sarcasm or defensiveness. Somehow, this made Lisa even more irritated. She wanted him to argue back, to show some sign that her comments were affecting him. Instead, he remained perfectly calm and respectful. "The deeper meaning," Lisa said, her voice taking on a lecturing tone, "comes from years of study, of building understanding layer by layer. You can't just memorize formulas and expect to truly comprehend the elegant beauty of mathematical relationships." "That makes sense," Xander nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be willing to share some of that layered understanding with me? I would very much like to learn from your experience." Lisa paused, caught off guard by his sincere request. For a moment, she almost softened. Then her pride kicked back in, reminding her that she was the expert here, not him. By the end of the first week, Lisa's comments had become increasingly sharp. When Xander correctly identified an error in one of her chemistry diagrams, she snapped, "Perhaps you should focus on understanding the basics before trying to correct human science." When he solved a complex engineering problem in half the time, it usually took her students, she said. "Speed isn't everything. True understanding requires careful contemplation, not quick guesses." When he politely asked if they could discuss some of the philosophical implications behind the scientific concepts, she laughed dismissively. "I hardly think your species is ready for the subtleties of human philosophical thought." Through all of this, Xander never once responded with anger or defensiveness. He would simply nod, thank her for the feedback, and continue with whatever task she had given him. His consistent politeness began to feel like mockery to Lisa, even though there was nothing in his tone or expression to suggest he meant it that way. Dr. Collins, her research partner, started expressing concerns after observing one of their sessions through the monitoring system. "Lisa, I think you might want to reconsider your approach," he said during their coffee break. "This being seems genuinely interested in learning from us. Maybe we could try a more collaborative method." "Collins, you don't understand the psychology involved here," Lisa replied dismissively. "These sessions aren't just about information exchange. They're about establishing the proper relationship dynamic. If we show weakness or uncertainty, we lose all credibility." "But he's not showing any signs of aggression or superiority," Collins pointed out. He seems remarkably patient and respectful. Lisa stirred her coffee aggressively. That's exactly the problem. He's playing some kind of game, pretending to be humble while showing off his memorization skills. I need to break through that act and get to his real motivations. What Lisa didn't realize was that in the adjacent monitoring room, several other scientists had been watching her interactions with growing concern. They had noticed that while Xander's responses remained consistently respectful and curious, Lisa's behavior was becoming increasingly hostile. Dr. Peterson, the project director, made a note in his file that perhaps they should consider rotating lead researchers if the current dynamic didn't improve soon. Meanwhile, Xander continued to arrive each morning with genuine enthusiasm for their sessions. He would bring thoughtful questions about human culture, science, and philosophy. He seemed genuinely fascinated by the complexity of human knowledge and eager to understand not just the facts, but the reasoning behind them. But each day, as Lisa's comments grew more cutting and her tone more condescending, something almost imperceptible began to change in Xander's silver eyes. The enthusiasm remained, but it was now mixed with something else, something that looked almost like sadness. By the end of the second week, Lisa had convinced herself that she was making progress in breaking down what she saw as Xander's pretense. She believed that his quiet responses meant she was finally getting through to him, showing him his proper place in their intellectual hierarchy. She had no idea that each insulting comment, each dismissive gesture, was being carefully noted and analyzed by someone whose understanding of psychology and social dynamics far exceeded her own. Lisa walked into the facility on Monday morning with a sense of determination that bordered on anger. Over the weekend, she had made a decision. These sessions with Xander had gone on long enough. It was time to end this charade and put him in his place once and for all. She had spent her entire Sunday preparing what she considered the ultimate test. Not just difficult questions, but a complete verbal strategy designed to break through what she saw as his infuriating act of false humility. Today, she would prove beyond any doubt that human intelligence was superior. Xander was waiting for her as always, but this time, he wasn't reading. He sat quietly with his hands folded on the table, those strange silver eyes looking directly at her as she entered. Something about his expression seemed different today, though Lisa was too focused on her own agenda to notice. "Good morning, Dr. Rodriguez," he said in his usual soft tone. "How was your weekend?" Lisa ignored the question completely. She slammed her briefcase down on the table with such force that the metal surface rang like a bell. Several papers scattered from the impact, but she didn't bother to collect them. "Let's skip the pleasantries today," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's really going on here." Xander tilted his head slightly, a gesture that Lisa had once found curious, but now saw as condescending. "I'm not sure I understand. What would you like to discuss?" Lisa began pacing around the small room, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor. "What I'd like to discuss is this little game you've been playing with me for the past 2 weeks. This act of yours." "Act?" Xander's voice remained calm, but there was something in his tone that suggested genuine confusion. "Don't play innocent with me," Lisa snapped, spinning around to face him. "You sit there pretending to be interested in learning, pretending to be respectful. But really, you're just showing off. You think you're so clever, don't you?" Xander said nothing, which only fueled Lisa's anger further. "You know what I think?" she continued, her voice rising. "I think your species sent you here as some kind of test. You memorized a bunch of our textbooks and now you're here to see how easily you can fool the stupid humans. Dr. Rodriguez, I assure you that's not—" "Don't interrupt me!" Lisa shouted, her professional composure completely gone now. "I've been studying alien life longer than you've probably been alive. I know manipulation when I see it." She moved closer to the table, leaning forward to stare directly into Xander's eyes. "You want to know what I really think about your little performance? You want honesty? Fine. Here's honesty. Lisa took a deep breath and unleashed everything she had been holding back for weeks. I think you're pathetic, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You come here acting all humble and curious, but you're just a cheap imitation of real intelligence. You can repeat our formulas and solve our equations, but you don't understand any of it. Not really. Xander's expression didn't change, but Lisa thought she saw something flicker in those silver eyes. Good, she thought, finally getting through to him. You sit there with that blank stare, pretending to be wise, but it's not wisdom. It's emptiness. You're like a computer that's learned to mimic human responses without actually understanding what they mean. She began circling the table again, her voice growing more vicious with each sentence. Do you want to know what the real tragedy is? Your people probably think they sent their best representative, but look at you. You can't even defend yourself properly. You just sit there taking whatever I say because you don't have the intelligence to formulate a real response. Lisa stopped, directly in front of Xander, her hands planted firmly on the table as she leaned forward. I've wasted weeks of my time trying to communicate with someone who's clearly not equipped for meaningful dialogue. You're not advanced. You're not mysterious. You're not even interesting anymore. You're just disappointing. She straightened up, running her hands through her hair in frustration. Your entire species must be incredibly primitive if you're the best they could manage. I mean, what does that say about them? They probably think they're so advanced, but they can't even send someone capable of basic intellectual discourse. Throughout this entire assault, Xander sat perfectly still. His hands remained folded on the table, his posture unchanged. Only his eyes seemed to register what was happening, and even then, his expression remained neutral. You know what the worst part is? Lisa continued, her voice now taking on a cruel edge. I actually feel sorry for you. You're probably doing your best, but your best just isn't good enough. You'll never be anything more than a curiosity, a specimen for real scientists to study. She walked back to her briefcase and began shoving papers inside, her movements sharp and angry. This whole project has been a waste of time. First contact with an alien species should be momentous, enlightening. Instead, I get stuck babysitting someone who can't even grasp the basics of scientific methodology. Lisa turned back to face Xander one final time, her expression filled with disgust. I'm recommending that these sessions be discontinued. There's clearly no point in continuing when one party lacks the cognitive capacity for genuine learning. For several long moments, the room was completely silent. Lisa stood by her briefcase, breathing heavily from her outburst. Xander remained seated, his silver eyes fixed on some point on the table between them. Then, slowly, Xander closed the notebook he had brought with him. His movements were deliberate and careful, as if he were handling something precious that might break. He stood up from his chair with the same fluid grace he had shown in every previous session. Lisa expected him to say something, to finally drop his act and respond with anger or hurt, or at least some kind of defense. Instead, Xander simply looked at her for a long moment. In his eyes, she thought she saw something that might have been sadness, though she dismissed the idea immediately. Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Rodriguez, he said quietly, his voice as calm and respectful as it had ever been. I believe I understand now. Without another word, Xander walked toward the door. Lisa found herself calling after him, almost against her will. That's it? That's all you have to say? No defense? No explanation? Xander paused at the door, his hand on the handle. He turned back to look at her one last time, and for just a moment, Lisa saw something in his expression that made her stomach tighten with an emotion she couldn't identify. Sometimes, Xander said softly, the most important lessons come from understanding what someone chooses not to say. Then he opened the door and walked out, leaving Lisa alone in the sudden oppressive silence of the empty room. Lisa sat in her office the next morning, feeling oddly satisfied with herself. She had finally put that alien in his place. No more pretending, no more games. She had spoken the truth, and he had walked away because he couldn't handle it. That was proof enough that she had been right all along. She was typing up her official report when Dr. Collins knocked on her door. His face looked pale, almost worried, which struck Lisa as strange. Collins was usually calm and collected, never one to show much emotion about work matters. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "Something important has come up about Xander." Lisa didn't look up from her computer screen. "If you're going to lecture me about my methods again, save your breath. I did what needed to be done. That creature wasn't here for legitimate scientific exchange." "That's just it," Collins said, sitting down heavily in the chair across from her desk. "We think he was, and we think we made a terrible mistake." Something in his tone made Lisa stop typing. She looked up to see Collins holding a thick folder filled with documents and photographs. "The security team has been monitoring all of Xander's activities since he arrived," Collins continued. "Not just our sessions with him, but everything. His living quarters, his private time, even his sleep patterns." Lisa frowned. "That's standard protocol. What's your point?" Collins opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper covered in strange symbols and mathematical equations. "These are transcripts of recordings from his room. He's been making daily reports to his people, speaking in his own language." And Lisa was growing impatient. "We finally found someone who could translate them." Collins placed the papers in front of her. "Lisa, you need to read this." The translated documents were detailed reports written in precise scientific language. As Lisa read, her confidence began to waver. The reports described human technology, culture, and behavior with the kind of deep understanding that only came from years of careful study. But what made her stomach drop were the personal observations about humanity itself. Xander had written about human creativity, their capacity for both kindness and cruelty, their remarkable ability to solve complex problems while sometimes struggling with simple emotional communication. "This doesn't prove anything," Lisa said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. "He could have studied us from a distance before making contact." Collins pulled out another set of documents. "Keep reading. These are his technical reports." The next pages contained detailed descriptions of technologies that didn't exist on Earth, energy systems that could power entire cities without pollution, medical techniques that could cure diseases humans hadn't even figured out how to treat yet, transportation methods that made their fastest rockets look like horse-drawn carriages. Lisa's hands began to shake slightly as she read. "Where did he get this information?" "That's not even the worst part," Collins said quietly. He pulled out a photograph that made Lisa's blood run cold. It showed a massive structure in space, clearly artificial, orbiting just beyond Earth's moon. "Our telescopes picked this up 3 days ago. We think it's his ship." The ship was enormous, easily the size of a small city. Its design was unlike anything humans had ever imagined, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to bend light itself. Even in the grainy telescope image, it was clearly the work of a civilization far more advanced than Earth. "How long has that been there?" Lisa whispered. "We're not sure. It's using some kind of technology that makes it nearly invisible to our detection systems. We only spotted it because Xander activated a communication beacon." Collins pulled out the final set of documents, and Lisa could see from his expression that this was the part he had been dreading to share. "These are his reports about you, Lisa, about your sessions together." Lisa grabbed the papers with trembling hands. Xander's observations about her were written with the same scientific precision as everything else, but they cut deeper than any insult she had ever received. He had noted her intelligence and extensive knowledge, giving her credit for genuine expertise in her field. But he had also documented her increasing hostility, her inability to consider that she might be wrong about something, and her tendency to attack others when she felt threatened. The most devastating part was his analysis of what her behavior revealed about human nature in general. He had written that while humans showed remarkable individual brilliance, they seemed to struggle with accepting ideas that challenged their existing beliefs. He wondered if this trait would make meaningful cooperation between their species difficult. The final report, written after yesterday's session, was brief and crushing. Xander had concluded that while humans possessed great potential for growth and discovery, they might not yet be ready for contact with more advanced civilizations. He recommended that his people wait another generation or two before attempting further communication. Lisa set the papers down with shaking hands. He was evaluating us the whole time. Not just evaluating, Collins said gently. From what we can tell, he was genuinely trying to learn from us. He seemed to believe that humans and his people could benefit from sharing knowledge and perspectives. But why didn't he tell us who he really was? Why did he pretend to be just a visitor? Collins pulled out one more document, this one much older. This is from his first report, sent the day he arrived. He explained to his people that he wanted to understand humans as they really were, not how they acted when they knew they were being judged by a superior civilization. Lisa read the translation with growing horror. Xander had written that he believed the best way to build genuine friendship between species was to approach humans as an equal, to learn from them without the complications that came from revealing his people's advanced technology. He had deliberately hidden his civilization's superiority because he wanted to give humanity the chance to show their best qualities without feeling inferior or threatened. "Oh no," Lisa whispered, the full weight of what she had done finally hitting her. "What have I done?" Collins nodded grimly. "The question now is whether we can fix this. Our linguists are working on translating his language so we can try to communicate with his ship, but we're not even sure if he's still willing to talk to us." Lisa stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "We have to find him. We have to explain, apologize, something." "Lisa, you need to understand something else," Collins said, his voice heavy with regret. "According to our monitoring systems, Xander hasn't been back to his quarters since he left your session yesterday. We think he might be preparing to leave." "Earth!" The room seemed to spin around Lisa as the full implications hit her. She hadn't just insulted a visitor from another world. She had potentially destroyed humanity's first chance at meaningful contact with an advanced alien civilization. Her pride, her need to feel superior, had made her blind to an opportunity that might not come again for centuries. "Can we track him? Find his ship's location?" she asked desperately. "We're trying," Collins replied, "but his technology is so far beyond ours that we're essentially trying to find a shadow in the dark." Lisa sank back into her chair, her mind racing through everything that had happened over the past few weeks. Every insult she had thrown at Xander, every condescending comment, every moment when she had chosen pride over curiosity. He had endured it all with patience and grace, still trying to learn from her even as she attacked him. And now he was gone, taking with him not just his own knowledge and friendship, but possibly humanity's chance to join a larger community of intelligent species in the universe. The weight of that responsibility settled on Lisa's shoulders like a crushing burden. She had always believed that her intelligence and education made her special, important, someone who could change the world. Now she realized that her greatest achievement might be preventing humanity from changing for the better. Lisa didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment staring at copies of Xander's translated reports, reading them over and over until she had memorized every word. Each sentence felt like a knife twisting in her chest, not because the words were cruel, but because they were so painfully fair and accurate. By dawn, she had made a decision. She couldn't undo what she had done, but she couldn't live with herself if she didn't at least try to make it right. She called Collins at 6 in the morning. "Have you found him yet?" "Lisa, you sound terrible. Did you sleep at all?" "Have you found him?" she repeated. Collins sighed. Our satellite tracking picked up some unusual energy readings about 200 miles north of the city. It's in a remote valley, completely uninhabited. We think it might be him. I'm going there. Lisa, wait. We should send a proper diplomatic team, people trained for this kind of situation. After what happened, maybe you shouldn't be the one to... Collins, this is my fault. My mess. I need to be the one to try and fix it. 3 hours later, Lisa was driving through winding mountain roads in a government vehicle, her heart pounding, harder with each mile. She had no idea what she would say to Xander when she found him. How do you apologize for potentially destroying your entire species' future? The energy readings led her to a valley so remote that her GPS lost signal. She had to navigate by compass and the rough coordinates Collins had given her. The road eventually disappeared entirely, leaving her to hike the final 2 miles through dense forest. When she finally emerged from the trees, she stopped dead in her tracks. Xander stood in the center of a wide meadow, looking up at the stars, even though it was still daylight. But it wasn't just his presence that took her breath away. The air around him seemed to shimmer and bend, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Above him, barely visible against the blue sky, was the outline of something massive. His ship wasn't the sleek, metallic craft she had imagined. It looked almost organic, like it had grown rather than been built. Its surface rippled with patterns of light that reminded her of water or flowing silk. Even partially hidden by some kind of camouflage technology, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Xander turned as she approached, his silver eyes meeting hers across the meadow. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said in that same gentle voice she remembered. "I was wondering if you would come." Lisa stopped about 10 feet away from him, suddenly unsure of herself. "You were waiting for me?" "In a way, yes. I thought you might want to understand what really happened between us." Lisa felt tears she didn't know she had been holding back start to flow down her cheeks. "Xander, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand what you really were, what this meant." Xander tilted his head in that familiar gesture. "What did you think I was?" "I thought you were trying to make me look stupid. I thought you were playing games with me, showing off." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was so focused on protecting my ego that I couldn't see what was really happening." "And what was really happening?" Lisa took a shaky breath. "You were trying to be our friend. You could have come here with all your advanced technology, made us feel small and primitive. Instead, you approached us as equals, and I threw it back in your face." Xander nodded slowly. "Your species is remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez. In 3 weeks of studying your knowledge, I learned things that will benefit my people for generations. Your mathematics, your art, your philosophy, even your mistakes teach us something valuable." "Then why are you leaving?" Xander looked back up at his ship, and Lisa could see genuine sadness in his expression. "Because I also learned that many of your people aren't ready to see others as equals. When you feel threatened or inferior, you attack. When you don't understand something, you try to destroy it rather than learn from it." "That's not true of everyone," Lisa said desperately. "There are good people. People who would welcome you, who would want to learn." "I know," Xander said softly. "I've seen your history, your literature, your capacity for growth and compassion. That's why this is so difficult." He turned back to face her fully. "Dr. Rodriguez, can I ask you something? In all our sessions together, did I ever do anything to make you feel small or stupid?" Lisa thought back through all their interactions, searching for moments where Xander had been condescending or superior. She couldn't find any. Even when correcting her mistakes, he had been gentle and respectful. "No," she whispered, "you never did. The only person who made me feel small was myself." "Then why did you react with such anger?" The question hung in the air between them. Lisa knew the answer, had known it from the beginning, but saying it out loud felt like admitting to a terrible crime. "Because I was scared," she finally said. "Scared that maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. Scared that everything I had built my identity on might not matter if there were people like you in the universe." Xander stepped closer, and Lisa was surprised to see something like relief in his eyes. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me," he said, "and it's also the most hopeful." Hopeful, because fear can be overcome. Pride that refuses to bend will eventually break, but fear can be faced and conquered. He gestured toward his ship. "I haven't sent my final report yet." Lisa's heart leaped. "You haven't?" "I wanted to wait, to see if anyone would come looking for me, to see if any of your people were capable of the kind of growth you've just shown." "What does that mean for us? For humanity?" Xander was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying her face. "It means I'm going to recommend a different approach. Not full contact, not yet, but a slow introduction. A few carefully chosen individuals who have demonstrated the ability to learn from their mistakes." Lisa felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by crushing doubt. "I don't deserve to be one of those people, not after what I did to you." "Dr. Rodriguez, do you think you're the same person who walked into that room 3 weeks ago?" Lisa considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she had been so certain of her own superiority, so convinced that her intelligence made her better than others. Now she stood in a meadow, humbled by her own ignorance and desperate to make amends for her mistakes. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not the same person." "Then you're exactly the kind of person my people need to meet," Xander said with a smile that seemed to light up his entire face. "Someone who can grow, who can admit when they're wrong, who can put the greater good above their own ego." He reached into a pocket of his simple clothes and pulled out a small device that looked like a combination of crystal and metal. "This is a communication device," he said, offering it to her. "If you're willing, I'd like you to be humanity's first official ambassador to my people, not because you were perfect, but because you were willing to become better." Lisa took the device with trembling hands. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "I won't let you down again," she promised. "I know you won't," Xander replied, "because now you understand that this isn't about proving how smart you are. It's about learning how much more there is to discover." As they talked, the sun began to set behind the mountains, and Xander's ship became more visible against the darkening sky. Lisa realized that this moment, standing in a remote meadow with an alien friend, marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for all of humanity. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true wisdom begins with admitting how much you don't know, and true strength comes from choosing humility over pride. It was a lesson that would serve her well as humanity took its first tentative steps toward joining a larger community among the stars.